Hello, just in time for Christmas, we got a surprise Avatar news drop. I was not expecting this to happen this close to Christmas, but here we are. We have an interview with the showrunner. I read through it, I highlighted a few things. There's not a lot of news, but I think there are important tidbits that we need to talk about. Also, before we get to that, there's a new picture. I thought about this for a long time, and I'm not sure where this could be. The only real place where I think this could be is with the waterbending scroll and with the pirates. Otherwise, I've got no clue where this could be. They're obviously wearing, like, lighter clothes, so this is not the start and this is not the end. This is somewhere in the middle. But a lush forest, I mean, I will talk about it with the interview as well, but they are changing some things to make them flow better, so this could just be a transitionary period from, like, one event to the other, and this might be like nothing. So I don't think there's really much to say about where this could be. In terms of the costume design, I've said this before, no complaints. I think the costume design is really, really good. A cool little picture, not much I think we can really glean from there. That said, let's get to this. So obviously much of this talks about working without the original creators, right? I think this is the first thing that they actually talk about right here. So as we know, they departed in 2020 for what were supposed to be creative differences, and there's a little bit of continuation down here as well with the Avatar Studios, right? So I've said this a million times at this point. What I think it was is I think Bryke got the green light to make Avatar Studios. I don't think this was like a, we don't like Netflix, we're gonna leave Netflix. I think genuinely they just got a better deal to make their own thing, hence creative differences, right? That's like the best way you could put it. What I basically think happened is they signed a bunch of NDA deals, because like the Avatar Studios deal, it came out of the blue. Those things take a very, very long time, and the timing just lines up too perfectly for it to be like a, oh hey, surprise, you know? That's what I think happened. I don't think we'll find out for a very long time what actually happened, but that's what I think it is. And at the same time, you know, people say they're not going to watch this just because the original creators are not involved, which I think is totally fair, up to you. I do think it's kind of a, you know, it is a bit of a red flag that they left. At the same time, there's also Legend of Korra, which people don't like, and it is from the original creators. So, you know, which, by the way, I do like Legend of Korra. I think Legend of Korra is generally really good. But yes, mixed thoughts on this, but basically I don't think it's that bad. And obviously a lot of this also talks about with dealing with that legacy. I mean, it's the same thing I talked about with One Piece, right? Imagine trying to adapt Avatar. You've got to be carrying the weight of a lot, you know? I mean, people have very, very big expectations for this, especially after One Piece that has now been successful, right? And people have realized that, wait, hold on, there is no live-action curse, you just need to make a good thing. You know, this is not some magical thing that people can do. You just need to get good people together and you can make a good thing. Big surprise. They also talk about, of course, the inspirations. This isn't like Western, European fantasy, you know, this is deeply rooted in Asian mythology and stuff like that, which is great. Not really much else to say there. And then we talk about the presence that the original creators have left behind, right? Now, first of all, I don't know if I'll bring it up here. I'll try to look through my archives. There have been talks of them actually working together with Avatar Studios to incorporate lore from the Avatar Studios in the live-action version. Take this with a grain of salt. It's what I've heard. I try to keep an eye on all of these things, but I might have lost it somewhere along the way. I do recall something like that. So I do think they are still working together. Especially because we also heard in the, what's it called? Braving the Elements, that's what it's called. They talked a little bit about how they're not huge fans of the ending of Book 1. So maybe some of what they wrote originally might be incorporated into the live action as well. We don't know that. Just something to keep in mind. All of this is to say that there are things from them that are being thought about, they're being talked about, right? This is not like we've just erased everything they did. No, not at all. We have Katara's mom, Aang's parentage, and stuff like that. I think it's perfectly fine if we don't explore these, especially like Aang's parentage, right? It's not really relevant. I feel like for him as a monk, I think Gyatso being a more fatherly figure almost makes more sense. And there's not like a direct link to any of his parents. In the same way, someone like, I don't know, like Luffy, right? We don't really need to talk about his mother at all because she's not entirely relevant in the grand scheme of things. This is Avatar The Last Airbender, but it is our Avatar The Last Airbender. You know, this is something I talk about a lot with all of these adaptations. I think there's a very fine line between changing something and in terms of adapting it, you know, saying this is a different thing, Don't treat it as the animated show. It's not going to be the animated show. It will be different. And also changing things for the sake of changing things and just saying, this is mine now, you know? I think there is respecting the material and therefore changing it so that it better fits the medium and just changing it, you know? Based on everything I've seen, I think it's the good kind of respecting the material but changing it so that it actually fits the medium. You know, again, same thing we talked about with One Piece. I'm going to be referencing that a lot because I feel like it is just about the best example for this sort of stuff, right? There are a lot of changes with Season 1, some very drastic, like an entire arc is rewritten. It was really, really good. No complaints. And obviously there we did have Oda overseeing everything. Here we kind of don't, but we don't really know that too, you know? We're not entirely sure how the behind-the-scenes stuff is going on. But for now, let's just assume that, yeah, the original creators are gone completely. The biggest thing with this is, of course, Season 1. Season 1 of Avatar is kind of a, you know, villain of the week type of thing. And they're talking about this in terms of transitioning to a more serialized model. And the thing with One Piece is that it wasn't this sort of deal. You know, One Piece is one continuous story. So adapting it is kind of actually much easier, despite the overall universe of Avatar, in my opinion, being infinitely easier to adapt, just because of how much more grounded it is, as opposed to something like One Piece. But the thing with Season 1 of Avatar is, what do you do with an episode like The Great Divide? What do you do with The Fortune Teller? What do you do with these episodes where, if you mush them together with something else, it will feel odd, but people want to see them? How do you go about it? You know, like the Blue Spirit has to be there, obviously. But what do you do with the episodes that come after the Blue Spirit and before the Blue Spirit? Do you somehow mesh them together? Because these will be 8 one-hour-long episodes, you know? You can't really mesh two completely different stories in a single episode. It feels odd. You can do multiple time jumps, but for like casual audiences, they don't really respond well to time jumps, especially mid-episode, you know? I mean, just look at something like House of the Dragon. It will be very interesting to see what they cut. I think there will be a lot cut from Season 1. I have a feeling something like The Great Divide will be cut, and things like The Fortune Teller might also be cut. I think a lot of these things might be left on the cutting room floor, unfortunately. I think they might be referenced in some way. I think we might have like shots of them going through these locations, but I don't think these will be like full-on stories, right? Because I just can't see them weaving this into a 8-episode season. Even though the runtime is exactly the same. The runtime is basically exactly the same as the original story. Purely in terms of making the story flow, I could almost envision like episode 7 ending with the Fire Nation showing up on the shores, and then the entirety of episode 8 is the Siege on the North, right? Unlike the original series where the Siege on the North is a 2-parter, and that's like 10% of the whole show, with this, it's going to be comparatively like a lot more, right? So a lot of this will just come down to these transitionary periods, and how they weave these stories together. That's probably like the only thing that I'm worried about, because it kind of, you know, I was kind of proven right with One Piece, with how many of the big story beats were sort of, like, One Piece had all the big story beats, and I'm sure this will have as well, especially with Season 2 and 3, by the way. I think Season 2 and 3 will be infinitely easier to adapt because they have like a much more distinct flow. Season 3 is like the perfect example of that, right? Even Season 3 does have things like The Painted Lady, which is kind of a standalone story, and it will be interesting to see what they do with those. But in terms of the overall structure of Season 3, it is like much, much more clear, right? Even though Season 1 does have the overarching theme of reaching the North, Season 3 is like we are in the Fire Nation, and this is like the end stretch, you know? And ditto for Season 2. Most of Season 2 revolves around, first of all, learning of the eclipse, and then carrying out all that. Whereas Season 1 is a bit more like weekly adventures. It'll be very interesting to see what they do with the Ember Island players in Season 3. We'll see what happens there. But point is, Season 3 has a much more distinct structure, Season 2 as well. So those will probably be easier to adapt. More so Season 1 that I think we need to worry about, especially because it is Season 1. And you know, that kind of will decide what happens to Season 2 and 3. So let's all make the pact to watch it at least 5 times, all the way through, and recommend it to everyone we know. And the last thing I want to talk about is them talking about the actual start of the show, right? So, does this talk about the actual, like, narration of episode 1 that is obviously not there for the rest? Is this just talking about meeting Aang? Could be both, but I think based on what we saw in the trailer, there is already, like, a good reason to suspect that what they're referring to here, in terms of making a difference, is with the attack on the Air Nation, right? So we already saw a lot of that. which in the animated show, like the shot of them actually sieging the temples, we only really saw that with Roku's flashback, right? Whereas here, it seems like that is literally the first thing we see, and actually the air nomads also fighting back, which will be very, very cool to see. So I think that's what they're referring to with the changes to the actual start as well. I'm not expecting like a huge tonal shift or anything, right? I think this is just something to say we are starting at a bit of a different place. But of course, I mean, finding Aang, all of that is probably going to be the same, right? So I don't think we should be expecting that Aang, instead of being in an iceberg, is like hidden inside of a wall or something. I don't think so. I think it's just in terms of setting up the whole opening sequence. Maybe Katara's narration actually happens as we see the air nomads fight back, or something along those lines. I don't know. But yes, not much else to say about this interview. I guess we'll have to wait and see on what this actually turns out to be, you know? Like I said, we all promised to watch it at least 20 times all the way through, and then we'll get a renewal for Season 2 and meet Toph, right? That's what we all want. I think the most important takeaways from this is that they're talking about actually setting it apart deliberately, but it seems like they also don't want to change things just because, you know, talking about how, you know, their presence is still here, and they realize the legacy they're dealing with, right? This is not something they want to mess with. This is not something they want to turn into something that is not Avatar. I feel like a lot of that is very, very... I think we can see that purely visually, right? Through the costumes, through how they sold the trailer. Like, the trailer has literally every single location that the movie that shall not be named didn't have, right? I feel like that is very deliberate. And also now with things coming out of Netflix, and like the executives actually making the decisions, it does seem like they've realized the market that a lot of these animated shows have, right? Like very recently, even the One Piece anime is getting a remake. And I think all of these things, even though they don't seem directly connected, I think they are. Ditto for the upcoming Death Note adaptation, right? The live action one. I think all of these points are sort of an insight into Netflix realizing that we don't need to mess with these things. They are good as is. We don't need to change them. We don't need to make this a moody teen drama. We just need to take what is there, give this to someone who knows their stuff, and just basically make it again. But, you know, in a live-action sphere, toning some things down, changing some things there, here and there. But nothing too major like we saw with, again, the movie that shall not be named. But yes, do let me know how you are feeling about all of this. I'm not really expecting anything else until, like, at least mid-January. I think we're not getting anything over Christmas or anything. But whatever the case, then we're into February, and I'll watch the entire thing in a single sitting. I'll stream the whole thing. It's going to be an 8-hour glorious journey. So I hope to see you back for that. Like I said, do let me know what you're thinking. Obviously, I'm guessing everyone here is also excited for the Avatar Studio stuff, which will hopefully also finally get news in 2024, considering that the movie is still set to be out in 2025. All right, hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you back sometime soon, TM. Bye-bye.